I remember Brother Leroy used to say that. Sometimes he would say that I find that song a little bit offensive. Are you sowing the seed of the king, dumb brother? That's where punctuation matters and inflection matters, right? We do have a handout this evening. Scott said he will gladly bring one to you if you just raise your hand. Sister Florine needs one. There's probably a few people. I know you're not used to seeing that. Noah, you may want to jump up and help him. What? Oh, Noah said he's got one. He's happy. All right. That's not what you said. I was paraphrasing a little bit. I was thinking this afternoon maybe I could get maybe make one of those little, like a stop sign or something I could print out and have it in red and just stick that back there on the Sunday nights we have one. I know I don't typically have one, but the Bible and science lessons are a little bit more involved, so I think it, hopefully at least, is helpful. I'll go ahead and tell you while he's getting everybody. We're looking tonight at anatomy and physiology. When we talk about anatomy, that's the study of the structure of the various parts of the human body, and the physiology aspect of this is the study of the action of the components of the human anatomy. The psalmist says in Psalm 139:14, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. Paul is going to use this amazing harmony of the human body to illustrate the unity that the spiritual body of Christ is to have. 1 Corinthians 12, verse 18, he says, Now hath God set the members, every one of them in the body, as it hath pleased him. Everybody get one? Anybody get missed? All right, good deal. So he says, Now hath God set the members, every one of them in the body, as it hath pleased him. It's interesting because that word set is often used of God's creative activity. You see an example of this in Genesis 1:17. It talks about in verse 14, God put lights in the firmament. He said, let there be lights in the firmament. And then in verse 17 it says, God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. In Job 38, verse 10, if you back up to verse 8, he's talking about the sea. This is God speaking to Job, of course, and he's talking about the sea and its bounds. And then in verse 10 of Job 38, he says, And break up for it my decreed place, and set bars and doors. And you go into the next verse, he's talking about setting a bound for the sea. In other words, its waves can only go so far. The waves roll on the shore, tide comes in, tide goes out, but there's a bound for the sea. But that's set, again, indicative of God's creative activity. And so the question we're asking here and answering, hopefully, is the human body an accident of nature, or is it a marvel of design that points to an all-powerful, almighty, all-knowing designer? And I think to ask that question is to answer it, but we want to look at it in a little bit more detail this evening. Somebody said it's ambitious. We got a two-sided handout, so that said, let's just jump right in and get moving, so because we do have several things to cover here. We're going to look at this in 4 different points, the first being the stunning organization of the human body. The human body, is as Brother Jackson puts it in his book, The Bible and Science, a mini-universe. It has amazing precision and organization. Here's the thing, though. The things that are left to themselves in nature tend toward disorganization. You leave something to itself in nature, it doesn't get more organized. It gets more disorganized. So the organization of the human body argues for more than just nature. In fact, a well-known evolutionist, especially well-known in his day, he's since left this life, but George Gaylord Simpson, Dr. George Simpson. He was a PhD, wrote several science textbooks, or co-authored, some he authored, some he co-authored. This quote comes from The Meaning of Evolution, page 293, but he described the human body as, quote, the most highly endowed organization of matter that has yet appeared on the earth, end quote. Well, the organization of the body argues for more than just nature. It argues for design. Design, of course, demands a designer. There are 4 levels of organization in the human body. There are cells, tissue, organs, and systems. Let's talk first about cells just a little bit. This is the smallest unit of life. We learned this very early in biology and especially in anatomy and physiology. It's the smallest unit of life. Some folks estimate there are some 100 trillion or so cells in the human body. The average is less than 1/1000th of an inch in length, but they are highly complicated. There is a cell membrane that surrounds the cell, and somehow that membrane knows just what to let in and just what to let out. Inside the membrane, you have cytoplasm, which is itself bustling with activity. Again, as Brother Jackson puts it, you have miniature power plants, transportation systems, sewage operations, protective systems, and on we could go. Cells come, of course, in several different types. You have blood cells, you have nerve cells, and on we could go. There are a couple of authors, Benjamin Miller and Ruth Good, who, in their book, Man and His Body, concerning the human cell, they said this. These are evolutionary authors, by the way. They confess that no man-made system, quote, however ingenious and efficient, end quote, can match, again a quote here, the functions of this single unit of life, too small to be seen with the unaided eye. Again, does that argue for chance, just random act of nature, or does it argue for design? So much more we could say about cells, but that's the smallest unit of life. Let's talk about tissue. When you have cells of the same type working together, you have tissue. Tissue, of course, also comes in different types. You have skin tissue, muscle tissue, and on we could go. Then you have organs. These are cooperative groups of tissue, such as a liver, kidney, the heart would be an organ, and so on. We can, of course, numerous organs in the human body, but these accomplish different functions within the human body. Then you have systems, and these are groups of organs working together for some purpose. Again, we'll say it a bunch of times, but it's because it's so true, and we need not miss it. We want to make sure we understand all of this organization just screams design. And design, of course, demands a designer. So there is this stunning organization. But next we want to look at, we just talked about these 4 levels of organization, the last being systems. And so we want to talk about this systematized operation within the human body. Well, what about it? A system is defined as, this is from the Basic Dictionary of Science, page 469, any group of things or parts working together to give a united effect. All the different structures specially designed to take part in one complex operation or having one purpose. And it's interesting because, as Brother Jackson says in his book, they said more than they intended there. Because did you catch that? All the different structures specially, what? Designed to take part in one complex operation or having one purpose. If the body systems are specially designed, well, guess what? There has to be a designer. The body's systems display remarkable organization and design. We'll look very quickly, just a brief look at 12 of these systems. What are these systems? There is, first of all, the integumentary system. This will be your skin, hair, nails. This serves a number of functions, but we can say, first of all, it serves, I'm about to forget this, just within a piece of skin about the size of a quarter. This was fascinating. I ran across this in Brother Jackson's book. Just a piece of skin about the size of a quarter, there is an entire yard, about 3 feet, of blood vessels. 4 yards of nerves, 25 nerve endings, 100 sweat glands, and more than 3 million cells. That's a piece of skin about the size of a quarter. Nothing short of amazing. What does skin do? Well, it serves as a protective covering for the body. Skin is, of course, your largest organ in the body. It also, some of this I had to cut out for space. I'll go ahead and tell you that the next blank there on the handout should be shields. I'll get to that one in just a moment. It shields interior parts. But it serves as a protective covering. We could also notice that sweat glands cool the body. They serve as kind of a built-in air conditioning system. The oil glands lubricate. You have a function of the skin to hold fluids within the body. But it also, and there's your next blank on the handout, shields interior parts from harmful UV rays from the sun. Nerve endings or nerves, period, are warning sensors for cold, heat, pain, and so on. And notice this. When skin gets damaged, cut, scraped, you know what it does? Well, barring some kind of infection or something, it repairs itself. I don't know of any man-made house that fixes its own roof, as Brother Jackson puts it. There's not a man-made house, there's not a man-made anything that can fix its own roof like that. And yet your body, you get a cut on your skin, a scrape, and it will repair itself. It's pretty amazing. That's the integumentary system. Next, we can talk about the skeletal system. There are about 206 bones in the average adult. Some bones form an inner framework, like wall studs in a house. Some of the bones provide a protective covering, such as the human skull. It protects the brain. Some bones function as levers in conjunction with certain muscles. Think about your arms and legs, a lot of function such as that. Bones also serve a metabolic purpose, dealing with minerals like calcium, phosphorus, and so on. So there's a lot of function just within the skeletal system. So much more we could say about these, but just a quick look at each one. There's the muscular system. This is the body's engine. There are over 600 muscles in the human body. And of all the things we can say about these, we're just going to say 3 here very quickly because I think it's pretty interesting. Some of these muscles will operate involuntarily, such as your heart, the largest muscle in the human body. But you don't have to stop and think and tell your heart to beat ever how many times per minute. It just does it on its own. It's an involuntary muscle. Then you have other muscles that operate voluntarily. Biceps, triceps, and so on. You have to tell them to act. If you just set your arm down, it just sits there. But if you think, I want to move my arm, or I want to lift something, well, you can do that voluntarily. And then there are some muscles that operate both ways. Some muscles operate both ways, such as your eyelids. You can sit here and think to yourself, I'm going to blink my eyes. But if you forget about it, don't worry, because they'll do it involuntarily. They'll take care of that. We can sit here and think to ourselves, in fact, you go to the doctor, one of the things he's going to do is put the stethoscope on you and say, deep breaths, and you can go, and do those deep breaths for him. But you know what? If you forget, you're not going to die, because your lungs will do that involuntarily. So they work both ways. Some muscles involuntarily, some muscles voluntarily, and some both. The muscular system is fascinating. What about the digestive system? This will be your stomach, intestines, and so on. This processes food to rebuild worn-out cells and also to supply energy for the body. And a lot of things we could say about digestion. I think I have a quote here, yeah. This is from those authors, Miller and Good, Man and His Body is the name of the book. We would have to boil our food in strong acids at 212 degrees Fahrenheit to do with cookery what the stomach and intestines do at the body's normal temperature of 98.6 degrees. That's pretty fascinating. It's equally fascinating that your stomach, which is made out of flesh, does not digest itself while it's digesting that steak that you ate or that chicken that you ate. You can eat flesh, and yet your stomach made out of flesh does not digest itself in that process. The digestion process begins immediately as soon as you put food in your mouth. Saliva begins that process. The stomach's lining is rebuilt every 3 days. Again, just an amazing system that screams design. The circulatory system is next. This will be your heart, blood vessels. It circulates the nourishment to various parts of the body. The heart is a pump with a built-in motor. It pumps somewhere around 1,800 gallons a day of blood all throughout the human body. Brother Jackson, in his book, again, The Bible and Science, this is on pages 83 and 84, says the blood is pumped through an astounding pipeline system, arteries, veins, and capillaries, which, if tied end to end, would stretch out for some 60,000 to 100,000 miles. Does anyone believe that the underground pipeline system of San Francisco contrived itself? Only disciples of Darwin are so credulous. There's no way. Just the circulatory system, any of these systems alone, there's no way it designed itself or it just happened by chance, let alone putting them all together and seeing the human body. Well, we can talk about the nervous system. This is your brain, spinal cord, nerves, and so on. This is the communications center of the body. You have nerves that carry messages throughout the body at some 450 feet per second. In other words, over 300 miles per hour. Dr. John Pfeiffer said the nervous system is, quote, the most elaborate communications system ever devised, end quote. It is. I would agree wholeheartedly with that. But here's the question. Who devised it? Who devised it? There's no way that just happened. Again, another quote here from Encyclopedia Britannica this time. Problem solving by the human brain exceeds by far the capacity of the most powerful computer. And folks, the brain itself is a bit of a paradox because you and I know, and if you don't know, just try going without it. The brain has to have sleep to function. And yet, the brain itself never really sleeps. But you can't function without sleep. Your brain just won't function. You lose enough sleep, and you'll start getting foggy mentally, and eventually you just can't function. And yet that brain itself is not sleeping. So there's the nervous system. There's the endocrine system, thyroid gland, pituitary gland, on and on we could go. This system regulates body processes by means of hormones used in the body for that process. Then there is the renal system, kidneys and bladder. This filters and removes waste from the blood. It also controls the water balance in the human body, maintains just right balance. That's the renal system. Then you have the respiratory system. This would be your lungs, trachea, and so on. This delivers oxygen to the blood and removes, I put CO2 just to save space there, but carbon dioxide. We need oxygen. We don't need the carbon dioxide. Delivers the oxygen to the blood, removes the carbon dioxide. We breathe in the oxygen. It's delivered throughout the body. We exhale the carbon dioxide. There is the immune system, lymph nodes, thymus, spleen, and so on. This system defends the body against harmful pathogenic viruses. In fact, it's an amazing thing because doctors will tell you, sometimes they'll say, well, if it's this, we'll give you an antibiotic. Maybe it's some kind of a bacteria or something. But if it's a virus, well, just have to let your body fend it off. They don't have something that can kill many of those viruses, and yet your body will, unless something is not functioning properly. It'll take care of that. It defends the body against those harmful viruses. Then there is the human reproductive system. So much could be said just about this. This would be the sexual organs of the human body. There is no comparable man-made system. Man simply cannot make a machine that reproduces itself. But God did. You just let that sink in. We'll try as we may, we can't make a machine that can just reproduce itself. God did. Brother Jackson, in his book, makes an observation talking about evolution and odds, and he says this. This is on page 85 of the book. I once sat in a philosophy class and heard the professor discuss this matter of evolution and odds. He suggested that anything is possible. He speculated that one might hold a shotgun 6 inches from the face of a potential victim and discharge the weapon. He then claimed that it would be mathematically possible that none of the shot would strike the target. He did not volunteer, of course, to demonstrate his theory. How true. These systems in the human body show amazing organization. And that organization, that design demands a designer. And with that, we go to this idea of symphonic operation. Symphonic operation. Again, Brother Jackson, this is page 86. He says, each system of the human body is an absolute wonder itself. Even more astounding is how they work together in such beautiful harmony, like a grand symphony orchestrated by a master composer. Indeed, there was a master composer. And then he quotes Psalm 139:14, I will give thanks unto you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. When we say symphonic operation, here's what we mean. Without the digestive system, you can't process food for nourishment. You could eat, but if you don't have the digestive system, you can't process it. It has to be broken down and the nutrients taken out, the waste gotten rid of. You need the digestive system for that. But even if you get that food and you break it down, you process it for nourishment, if you don't have a circulatory system, that nourishment can't reach the remote parts of the body. So if you have the digestive system but no circulatory system, it's no good because it's not going to get to the various parts of the body. But even if you have the digestive system and the circulatory system, if you don't have the nervous system, well, the circulatory system has no direction. It doesn't know where to carry what. Without direction from the nervous system, the brain, and so on. But you take away the skeletal system and the body has no structural integrity. You see how it's like a symphony? The body works so harmoniously. And if any of these are not working harmoniously, you've got a problem. There's a quote here. I can't see it very well. I'm going back over here. This is again from Brother Jackson's book. Each system of the human body is an absolute wonder itself. Even more astounding is how they work together in such beautiful harmony. Like a grand symphony. I read that quote, didn't I? I'm sorry about that. I had that already. This is the one I was looking for. This positively shows that the various constituents of the human body could not have developed in piecemeal fashion over vast ages of time. The system had to be fully operational at the very beginning. What powerful testimony this is to the fact that our bodies are masterpieces of design. There's no way the human body could have evolved these systems. The would-be human race would have been extinct long before these things ever could have evolved. So there is indeed amazing symphonic organization or operation. It is nothing short of mind-boggling when you consider how it all works together in such harmony. How anybody could look at that and say, well, that just happened, or over millions of years, or even thousands of years, or even a few years for that matter. Say that evolved? There's not a chance. It has to be fully functional from the very get-go. And then finally, we want to look at this idea of squabbling over oddities. What do we mean by that? Well, sometimes atheists will argue when it comes to the human body that if the body were designed by God, they say, there'd be no flaws in it. Well, what about that? There are several things to remember with this, first of all. And there are really three key points that if you consider these, it really answers that quibble, that squabble over these oddities or these flaws. And the human bodies, yeah, there will always be some flaws there. But number one, notice this: some features of the body simply may not be fully understood. People would talk, and I suppose still talk a lot, some scientists, evolutionary scientists, about things like what they like to call vestigial organs. Vestigial meaning its root word is vestige, something that's just left over. And that's the idea behind vestigial organs. They're just left over from evolution. We don't really need them anymore. One of those that they loved to talk about for many years was the appendix. You know, some people get sick, you have appendicitis, take you to the hospital, no big deal. They remove your appendix. Why? Because you don't need it. Just a vestigial organ. It's some leftover from evolution. Well, they've come to learn it's not useless. Can you live without it? Well, yeah, you can. Is that the best case scenario? No. You can live without one of your kidneys. But is that the best case scenario for you? No. There have been people that have been injured and had to have all or part of a limb removed. Can they live without it? Well, they can. But is that the best case scenario? Obviously not. And so they've learned a lot more about the appendix and really in the last, I don't know, maybe 50, 60 years or so. And it's not really fair to say that's a vestigial organ. And so it is with all the so-called vestigial organs. So realize that there are features of the human body that we may just not fully understand. That sometimes people will try to call it a flaw, and it's just not fully understood. Number two here, the Bible plainly teaches that humanity has suffered a degenerative process as a result of one thing, that three-letter word, S-I-N, sin. Romans 5:12 makes this very clear. Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and we don't suffer the guilt of Adam's sin, but we do suffer some of the consequences of it. So as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. And so there is a degenerative effect in the world because of sin. As Brother Jackson says, we are not what we used to be as a planet or as a species. That's just the degenerative result of sin. So sometimes atheists will say, well, if the body was designed by God, there'd be no flaws. I can assure you there were no flaws. But sometimes we mar God's creation, do we not? Satan comes along and he tempts man to do things that he knows will mar God's creation. And when we fall into that temptation, and sometimes that the consequences, again, it's not the guilt, but the consequences go for generations sometimes. And so the Bible clearly teaches that. The Bible doesn't sugarcoat that. It doesn't try to hide that. It's very plain about that. And so, yeah, there are going to be flaws just from living in a world that is, we often refer to as a fallen world. And then third, there is this observation: a machine may still evidence design even though some parts are broken. Again, a watch. You've probably heard that illustration before about the watchmaker. A watch demands a watchmaker, folks. Oh, but it doesn't keep time accurately like it once did. Oh, well, therefore it just appeared on its own. It just made itself, or it just popped up one day and it was a fully functioning watch, even at the time when it was working perfectly. You see, even if it doesn't keep time as accurately as it once did, even if something is wrong with it and it's just not working at all, that watch still demands a watchmaker. And so it is with the human body. Are there flaws? Yes. But not because God designed it with flaws. Because the effects of sin, the effects of sometimes it's just time's effect on the body. But the design still demands a designer. As we close out our thoughts, to answer the question we started with, is the human body an accident of nature, or is it a marvel of design? Again, to ask that question is to answer it, but there can be no doubt the human body is a masterpiece of nothing short of design. God has been mindful of mankind. In fact, that's what the psalmist says, Psalm 8:4, "What is man that thou art mindful of him, or the son of man that thou visitest him?" God has been mindful of us, and the question we close with tonight is, are we mindful of him? The God who loves us and created us with bodies that are nothing short of a masterpiece of design. In fact, over and over again in the Bible it teaches man is the apex of God's creation. That's not a statement made out of arrogance. If we understand the Bible properly and we understand our God properly, that is a statement made out of humility, and it ought to spur us to love the Lord who created us as the apex of his creation and who sent his Son. In fact, that's Romans 5:8. God has been mindful of us. He commendeth, demonstrates his love toward us, and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. We sometimes sing the song, "The Lord has been mindful of me." You know, Jesus taught in Matthew 5 that he sends his rain on the just and on the unjust. Makes his sun to shine upon the just and on the unjust. There are certain blessings that are reserved just for God's children, and make no mistake, the blessing of eternal life in heaven is reserved for God's faithful children. But there are other blessings that God gives to everyone. And as I heard it said years ago by a preacher, it stuck with me, and I have said this many times before, probably have said it many times here. You may not have given much thought or mind to God in days or weeks or months or even years. There's not a single solitary moment, though, that he hasn't been mindful of you. Are you mindful of him? And so we close with that question. Maybe you're not a Christian. You need to come and place your faith in the one who is mindful of you, who sent his Son. Place your faith in that Son who came to this earth and he lived a sinless life, overcoming temptation every single time. And he gave his life on the cross of Calvary that you might have eternal life. Place your faith in him. Surrender your will to his in repentance. Confess him as Lord. Be baptized into Christ. Your sins will be washed away. You'll be raised to walk in newness of life and have a fresh start. Maybe you've done that and you haven't been as mindful of the Lord as you need to be. Can we help you with that in some way? Maybe that's something you can take care of privately. Maybe it's something you need to take care of publicly. Maybe you need prayers for strength to do better. We stand ready and willing to help you however we can. The Lord truly has been mindful of us. Nowhere more so than in sending his Son. Jesus nowhere more so than in going to the cross and dying for us. The Song of Invitation asks, what will you do with Jesus? That question is yours to answer as we stand and sing to encourage you.